Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks. Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try and make your world a little weirder. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Niall. And this week, I just want to bring up my new organization that I'm launching.
Okay.
This isn't directly related to the podcast, but if you're on the bonus tiers, specifically the $5 tier, you'll know where I'm coming from here. I'm launching a Justice for Jet Jaguar
Okay.
rally and
Sure.
and think, because like, yes, we had Singular Point, but that died after one. I rewatched Godzilla vs. Megalon, which was the VHS tape I had as a child
Okay.
a couple days ago, and I was reminded how much I love that fucking stiff robotic man Jet Jaguar. And now I'm saying I think that like we've got more MonsterVerse movies coming. We've got all this other stuff that's coming down the pipeline with Godzilla in comic form and movie form, even in TV form. If you consider Apple TV Plus's Monarch, the history of whatever that show's called. There's a lot of Godzilla content out there, and I'm not seeing any fucking Jet Jaguar in any of it.
I've never heard of Monarch. That's new to me.
It was an Apple TV Plus show in which fucking Kurt Russell and his son Wyatt play the same character across two different time periods.
What the and this is Godzilla?
Yep. Monarch is
Okay.
the secret kaiju tracking and like the kaiju squad in the MonsterVerse. So
Okay, now here's the problem with that, because this sounds like a pretty open and apparent signaling of the bringing back of the Monarch mind control program.
yeah, I mean, especially when you have those movies so based around like Hollow Earth theory in a weird way.
Yeah.
You basically spend a lot of time in the Hollow Earth and the later movies in that series, and I kind of forgot that it was first introduced in the second one, King of the Monsters. So really, there's a lot of conspiracy theory shit in that movie. I'm pretty sure they like go to Lemuria in King of the Monsters.
No shit.
And like Godzilla's like hiding out and gets hit with a nuke.
We watched Godzilla versus King Kong together, didn't we?
Yeah, Godzilla. Yeah.
Was that one of the movies where like they had a conspiracy character who was like constantly right about everything, and
Yeah,
you know,
Byron
knew all the
Tyree Henry
secrets?
played a far too charming conspiracy theory podcaster.
More like a fart too charming conspiracy theory podcaster. Yeah, it is. We've talked about this plenty about how conspiracy theories breach into the mainstream has been a net negative on so many fronts.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying that being a conspiracy theorist myself, but
Yeah, and also running a long-running and extensive conspiracy theory podcast that has some listeners.
yeah,
So we have had some impact in
Dozens.
bringing certain things to at least a small select group of people who we love and appreciate totally.
I used to have dozens of fans. That's right, dozens. Name the Bomb the Music Industry tune. That one's
Yeah.
Fuck the Fans off
Yeah.
of I
Ooh, what
think
album's
To
that
Leave
off
or Die or Long Island.
Maybe
I
I honestly
I can't remember.
there's like their first like 3 albums. I because that's when I got into them on Get Warmer. That was the new album, and everything else was the older albums. So the track listings kind of group together in my brain because I was listening to them a lot of the time as a unit.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way because you showed them to me not long after you discovered Bomb, the music industry. and I have a very vivid memory of where exactly I was the first time I listened. Sure, I've said this on the podcast before, but it was on the Bomb the Music Industry web MySpace, and it was Get Warmer songs up on the MySpace. And I remember like closing the door to our office because we had a shared computer, and
the old computer room.
Yeah, and my sister had like a bunch of friends over, and I was like, I'm gonna sit in here and listen. I just like blasted music, and I just remember being like, holy shit, I've never heard anything like this before, and it blew my mind. Check out Bomb the Music Industry, I guess.
Yeah, now if you want the continuation, Jeff Rosenstock doing great. Is going to be on the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 and 4 re-release soundtrack.
Really?
Yeah, the track Head is going to be on Tony Hawk 3 and 4.
That's sick. That must be very affirming for old Jeff.
There's like Turnstile on there and shit. They've
crazy.
Added some new stuff.
Wow. Well, I did want to say with your Jet Jaguar thing, I do really appreciate Jet Jaguar. I mean, I love, Jet Jaguar inspired Jet Alone, and I have to respect that. And people never bring up the fact that Jet Jaguar put out a bunch of like great indie rock records.
Yeah, true.
However many years ago that was. I think they're defunct now, but
good old Jaguar records. Yeah, that's
no, Niall, actually we have an email to kick things off that we got from a listener.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Hit me up on my cell. Excel.
It's a lot of
yeah, but like I feel like there are certain things that are niche, but we've referenced so many times on the podcast that eagle-eared listeners will remember the last like 5 times I've made that reference.
We really, it is a game that we have learned to play with one another where we'll just sneak in obscure references to music that we're both into that will be completely indecipherable to listeners who haven't, jotted down notes about the references we make over the years. It's a fun game that I love.
Honestly, we're just trying to make a wiki worthwhile. We're trying to seed enough stuff that you can use in the tags so that whenever someone gets around to making the It Gets Weird wiki, there's enough stuff to kind of cross-reference so that you can work that way,
A wiki worthwhile sounds like the title of a film or an episode of a television series. I don't know exactly what it would be about, but a wiki worthwhile, I mean, that just sounds like the title to something. So
put it on the marquee.
We could, I think, and I guess at the very least, it's the title of this episode.
True, it could be, yeah.
So, we got an email from Mars, and they wrote in with the title "Writing in on Truthism," and here's what she says. Hi guys, and perhaps Jules. Can I just say right off the bat, my brain is fully poisoned. Whenever I say hi guys, it has just naturally become the same tenor and way that Greg Turkington says it on Cinema. It just crept into my brain every time I say it.
See, I know that because you have consistently talked about On Cinema for, I don't know, a decade at this point.
Yeah, it's yes. So it says, hi guys, and perhaps Jules. I've been listening for a long time and felt that this episode was my chance to write in on something I know about. So recently we talked about truthism.com, the defunct conspiracy website. And she says, Truthism was the conspiracy theory my father raised me with, and if my father is any kind of litmus test for the writer of that page, yes, he most certainly went through a bad divorce that was primarily his fault, that he does not acknowledge, instead choosing to blame it on the woman, who he claims steals some kind of life essence out of men. So,
wow.
That's a confirmation. I mean,
right.
I had my suspicions, right? She goes on to say, yes, my dad was a very sad and angry person. I totally could believe that he had penned the theory too if it weren't for the fact that the first time he ever used a computer was in 2008. Wow. As it was so spot on, right down to the women are corrupted by the Catholic Church, which is corrupted by some force beyond our ken. The only salvation is non-organized Christian faith in specifically Jesus. Not a direct quote, but certainly paraphrased. Thank you all so much for hosting all the wonderful content that you do. It's been a real struggle separating myself and my own beliefs from those conspiratorial beliefs my father loved to teach so much. As I'm a trans woman now in my adulthood, he would never have believed he was saying so much misogynistic nonsense to a girl. I believe that you guys over the years have helped me get a better grip on my own reality, which I cannot thank you enough for. Lots of love, Mars. P.S. I super appreciate how you don't put horrible ads in the middle of the podcast like so many others do. I'm joining the Patreon now. Oh, hell yeah.
Oh,
As I
hey,
finally
congrats.
got myself out of dire financial straits. Hell yeah. Really glad to have y'all around. A big shout out to Jules for being the best guest comic relief the show could ask for. Hey, we'll let Jules know that you said that, and I will do you the solid and not mention that to Garrett.
We're probably due to get Garrett back on.
We
here
do
again
actually. So for this episode, I had to go back and check on a topic because a name came up that I knew we'd talked about it before, and I wanted to make sure we didn't cover it in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an episode that had Garrett on it, and oh wow, going back. I mean, this was episode like 49.
Oh, wow. Very early.
What's kind of crazy about that, too, is we're doing episode 449 today. So that's 400 episodes ago. Do not look up the episode, Niall. I saw your hand move. Okay.
I was setting something down.
It won't really. Oh, okay, cool. It won't really actually spoil what I'm talking about. But I did go back and I listened to it just to make sure. I mean, I don't know whether it's the change of mics or what, but we sound like babies, which is really scary. And even scarier still, we're saying shit like Garrett and I have a whole thing in that episode about how we're going to jerk off to the mom from The Weekenders.
I vaguely remember this. Okay.
So it's a pretty good episode. So I had to check that out. It's always weird going back to the really old episodes and freaks me out, but I did. This week, I decided what I wanted to do was get back to the American swamps and woods and do some cryptid hunting.
Oh, shit.
Now, I stumbled across... There was one particular thing that I stumbled across that led me to look at other things that are in the same sort of area as that one thing. So I've got a couple of vegetable men for you.
Okay, that is not a thing that we've got a lot of background on in terms of episodes. I like you said there's some connection to episode 49, which I don't remember what that is.
I'll explain in a little bit, but so one of them is a humanoid cryptid that is closely related to like plant life.
Okay.
And another one that's more like an alien, but has a lot of the same trappings as a cryptid. And they both have their namesakes in the plant life they're surrounded by. And the alien, in its case, might even be composed of that plant life.
And okay, so which one is the guardian of the green? And like and what was that fucker's name? Like Alec something?
I'm not going to be able to pull that, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it actually came up because there was a whole angle to this first story where I found some researchers who are not cryptozoological researchers who were just investigating this story. And it was a lot of debunking and things that I don't think we need to get into because it's exactly what you would expect. And part of what they were talking was why does a legend like this persist? Well, we have these myths that we love to tap into that stick around and folklore and all the things you would expect. And one of their examples was talking about pulp sci-fi and comics, and they brought up Swamp Thing as an example of the kind of fiction that informs our folklore and legends about creatures.
Yeah. I like the like you could look at Swamp Thing. It has like an element of the Sasquatchy kind of shit to it in terms of like what it's pulling on, but it
Yeah.
also is like so it's such like specific to swamps and bogs and stuff in a cool way. So I'm excited to see what this alien is about, because I love Swamp Thing. And I was almost exactly right. It's Alec Holland is his fucking
Alec
name.
Holland. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Good job. I do love Swamp Thing. Actually, total side thing. I have a friend who's getting into comics a little bit, and it's so funny. I'll tell them how to find comics, and I'll kind of rattle off comic related stories that I remember from stuff that I like. And then they'll send me like a YouTube clip that's a 60-second short of somebody recapping Old Man Logan. And they'll just send that clip to me and just say, "Holy fuck." And I'm just sitting there thinking, yeah, welcome. This is
yep. Oh boy. Don't
welcome
look,
to the
if you're getting into comics, don't start with Mark Millar. Holy shit.
Probably not. But Swamp Thing's a good spot. I really loved that Swamp Thing arc.
And hey, if you start with the Mark Millar run of Swamp Thing, it's also co-written by Grant Morrison. So it's better than a lot of the other Mark Millar stuff out there.
Okay, well, Niall, let's kick this thing off with a swamp monster.
Hell yeah!
This is the Honey Island swamp monster. This creature is said to stand over 7.5 feet tall,
and it's on a swamp inside of an island.
Yes, it's
interesting.
So the thing is, my understanding of it is not that it's necessarily on the island itself, but it does seem to prowl the region surrounding this island, and the island is what the swamp is named after.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, and that's sort of relevant to the story. You'll see. So supposedly over 7.5 feet tall. This guy could play for the Lakers. He is also said to weigh somewhere between 400 and 500 pounds. And his other name, the other name that he sometimes gets referred to by is the Louisiana Wookiee.
I like that one a lot. That's really fun.
What was so funny about this one, like a lot of these Bigfoot adjacent creatures, is it warps in its visual depiction depending on the story and the storyteller, you know? So I saw a couple different versions of this guy. A lot of them depict him sort of like a Bigfoot. My favorite depiction of him, though, he's Bigfoot-like, but he almost has a cowl of swamp matter that just, you can think skunk ape, but he has like a hood and cowl that is made of swamp material. And he sort of has slightly reptilian or fishy appendages and stuff. And then there was another one where I can only describe it. I mean, not only. There's probably a lot of other ways to describe it. I'm going to describe it the only way I know how to. It looks like a giant, grown-up, buff as shit, monstrous Cubone. It doesn't have a skull. Oh, you know how Cubone, the Pokemon, has a skull over its face? Imagine if that was just its face, right?
Okay.
Instead of just a skull that it wears.
So it's got a cow head.
Yeah, it's sort of almost hound-like in a way.
Okay.
It's like a hound and a reptile coming together, which will make sense here as we go forward. But it's supposedly it's uncertain whether it's got a thick coat of fur that has all the swamp weeds matted into it, or whether these are just adapted features of its body. You know what I mean? Like, instead of the material being on top of it, it's uncertain whether that's actually just what its fur looks like.
Is it just part of the mass of it, or has it been? That's interesting. It's like sometimes alien, when like they can't tell if an alien is wearing clothes or if it just has some sort of like that like its exterior is just this weird, material.
Yes. the other detail that comes up a lot is that it's got yellow eyes, and these eyes are often described as reptilian. And it supposedly stinks to high heaven, and people refer to it as having the stench of death upon it. So,
all of these swamp cryptids seem to have this stank on them.
well, swamps are stinky places, right? You know,
Yeah.
there's swamp gas, and the earth is, just bursting with natural farts. And so I guess the conclusion you would naturally draw is that anything that lives in the swamp its entire life is going to accrue a stink.
Yeah,
So-
I guess I've never considered that because like in Swamp Thing, the opposite, the inverse force of the green is the rot.
True.
And so the stink of death would be like seems like it would be the rot, not the green. So basically, for some reason I'm just trying to apply the lore of Swamp Thing to an entire real world thing, of another fake real world thing. And I don't really know why I'm doing that, but it's
I
for
was
some
gonna
reason
say-
it's where I'm going.
Niall, this is the real world, not comics, so you got to get your head straight here.
Yeah, this is a swamp alien, not any of that silly comic shit.
This one is not the alien. I have two
Okay.
creatures. This one is not the one that's an alien. We'll get to the alien. This one is much more purely cryptozoological. So there were, I guess, mysterious disappearances of children in the area and livestock being slaughtered. And people didn't know what was doing that. And so you would blame the Honey Island swamp monster, right?
Mhm. Local boogeyman.
Now, the reason you get a lot of the descriptions and things that I just laid out for you is because there is this lore to it that there is a possibility or a theory. I don't know whether I want to call it a theory because it doesn't work scientifically speaking.
Mhm.
It feels more like folklore stuff, right? But
Yeah.
it's said that this thing might actually be the result of a chimpanzee and an alligator having a child together.
Really?
Yes, so that's why. I mean, that's why you get the different descriptions, right? Where it
Yeah.
sort of is reptilian in face and then has a big hulking muscular body.
So which one gave birth?
That's such a great question. I'm gonna have to assume.
Did a monkey
I guess
fuck
I
an
can't really-
alligator, or did an alligator fuck a monkey?
It could be that's such a great question that I don't know whether we could ever. It's sort of a Schrodinger's cat
Or did
chimp.
did an alligator lay an egg and then a monkey accidentally ejaculated on it, and in the miasma of the swamp it somehow kind of combined that in a sort of maybe like a natural whirlpool acting as a centrifuge
It's
kind of situation?
sort of like the cryptozoological equivalent of a toilet seat impregnation. That's sort of the idea. We could call this.
Mhm.
Schrodinger had his cat, and the question was, was the cat inside alive and fucking an alligator, or was it dead and nobody was fucking? Is I think the equation. And so for us, it could be the Nile and Kyle swamp monster. I don't know where I'm going with that.
Yeah,
but-
this was a really long walk, but I had a fun time with it. For some reason, Schrodinger's cat was fucking in one.
I think, is that not the or maybe I'm confusing things with what we just said.
Yeah, I mean, you were kind of combining the two, and it was really good. I
Thank you.
appreciate the effort.
Well, this creature is a foul omen. The forbidden union of alligator and chimp.
Mm-hmm.
So
Not only did they fuck, they got married.
they did
legally.
get married and divorced later on, unfortunately.
Yeah,
So
it's a really sad day.
it was sad. And based on your hypothesis of the cum done alligator egg, never actually consummated the thing.
It's true.
So
Look, sex can take many forms.
That's true.
This
You can
this
have
might
a
just be
chimp
what
watch a
they're
gator
into.
do their thing, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So, this thing was first seen in 1963 by a guy named Harlan Ford, which is a 1963 name if I ever heard it.
Oh yeah.
So this guy was a retired air traffic controller. He was, I think, a pilot, and one of his things after retiring was wildlife photography. So he's a nature boy. He's into doing this stuff. And Harlan Ford is going out on a trip with his friend Billy Mills, and they're flying a plane apparently when they see an abandoned cabin in deep inside of Honey Island Swamp. And they go to a clearing to go and hunt down this cabin that they're planning to stay at. And when they get there to this clearing, they see the Honey Island swamp monster.
Okay.
And they see it, they make eye contact with the creature for a moment, and then it runs back into the trees. And this is what Ford had to say about the creature. Quote, "It was nothing like I'd ever seen before, ugly and sinister and looking like something out of a horror movie." So he has this really frightening encounter where he just sees a monster and it runs away from him. And as I understand it, this story made it to, local newspapers and things like that. And so there's not a ton of information about the story itself, which is kind of weird. But apparently, years later in 1974, Ford goes back with his friend Mills because this entire time, 11 years go by, he is convinced that this creature is still out there.
Yeah.
But they're out, hunt some ducks and see if they can keep their eyes open for the monster. And on this trip in the same area, they find several dead boars. And the dead boars all have their throats slashed. Now, apparently, these boars were too far away from the actual water proper for it to have been a murder by alligator. Which
okay.
I guess is fair, but I also, you're still in a swamp.
Yeah.
But maybe
alligators can go on land.
Yeah.
So
I don't think they want to go super far because they do want to get back into the water. But they, did I say 11 years? I meant 9. Jesus. So they're like, this was not a typical alligator slaying. This must be the monster. And so as they're looking around, they find footprints. And the footprints they find are 3-toed and webbed. And these are nearby these dead boars.
Interesting.
And you can actually find a photograph of a plaster cast of this footprint. Now, apparently, Ford and Mills, while they were they're very curious about this monster, they're also too scared to try and have another encounter with it. So they get the hell out of there.
So do we have any actual full on description from these guys from this first encounter, or did the descriptions come later?
I think the descriptions first popped up in the newspaper reports, which I don't have on hand. But that's the impression that I got, is that the story was taken to the papers and that's where it was described. I did see a photo of somebody holding a newspaper clipping, but I didn't have enough information. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, and when you look into this story, this is kind of just how it's told. It's sort of just a little blurb, but I found some extra stuff that I thought was interesting.
Okay.
So Ford takes these casts of the footprints and he takes them to the local game warden and the College of Agriculture in the area where they're going to analyze it. And supposedly the people working on analyzing this thing couldn't come up with any definitive answer, which for a cryptid believer means it's unknown. It's a cryptid footprint. For anybody else, it means, we don't know what this is. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a cryptid, but this is sort of taken as the evidence to confirm that there is a monster with webbed three-toed feet in the area.
Okay.
So Ford goes back to the area, despite how much he fears this thing. And he brings a camera with him. And then the story just kind of peters out and then comes back way later. Because for whatever reason, nobody ever was told that he had found evidence when he went on this trip with the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find that years later, he apparently did get video capture evidence of the creature.
Oh, shit. Okay.
So Dana Hollyfield is the granddaughter of Harlan Ford. And she runs the website honeyislandswampmonster.com. She, I guess, has a documentary on the creature. She has a book that is called Honey Island Swamp Monster Documentations. And you can find all her stuff online. So she's
now, do you think
continuing.
that might sell better if it had a little snappier title?
Maybe. Yes, actually. But it is also one of those books that, when you're in the area and you're in, like a little store, like a local curiosities place, that's the book that's on the shelf. And there's
in the
dozens
like
of
local
copies.
authors section.
Yes.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, Ford has since passed away. But according to Hollyfield, when he died, she was given a roll of 8mm film that was labeled Honey Island Swamp Monster. And this had been left in a box that Ford had at his house up until he passed away. And nobody had seen it except for her grandfather.
Shit.
So I've seen this footage. I gotta be honest, it's not super compelling and it's very short, but you see something moving in the trees and it's a big looking thing.
Yeah.
He had apparently he had been shooting footage from a tree that he was set up in, and he captures footage of this large bipedal sort of vaguely humanoid creature off in the distance, and it's just walking around about 100 yards from him. And what the internet says is that cryptozoologists have analyzed this footage and said, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, like sure. Yeah, okay.
So Hollyfield, for herself, says that maybe there's something like this out there, but if something like that is out there, Honey Island Swamp would be the perfect breeding ground for a creature like that. And she says this, quote, wildlife, don't laugh at that. I get it, okay?
Yeah.
Quote, wildlife and fisheries protects large sections of the swamp, and there are parts of the swamp that man has not set foot on. I said that kind of weird. Holyfield also said that possibly why Ford never released this footage is that he was worried that a fellow hunter might be mistaken for the creature and get hurt or killed.
Okay.
I mean, right. I guess, but I think that if you're already out there hunting for Bigfoot or cryptids or what have you, I don't know. I can't imagine I mean, maybe I could be totally off here, but I was going to say, I can't imagine a hunter who's going out with a rifle who's like, I want to just shoot the fuck out of Bigfoot. But
I feel like if we
wrong.
go back through our episodes, we'd have a direct quote from somebody that's saying just that.
I'm trying to shoot Bigfoot. Yeah, you're probably
right.
But she goes on to say, quote, he was so interested in learning more about what he saw. Maybe he learned more than what we thought he did. So that's most of the details surrounding the story. It's very vague. And there's not a lot, like you have the little video clip, you have the plaster cast, those things are still out there. Uh-huh. But expanded material online, at least, is pretty slim. I would love to, check out his granddaughter's book just to see if she has other stuff in there.
You gotta hope that she does, because that would be really hard to write a full, like, actual length book out of what we've talked about.
Yeah, exactly. So to get back to the whole alligator and chimp lovemaking thing, Part that legend comes from the story of how there was a train wreck near Pearl River in this area sometime around the early 20th century. And based on this particular folklore, this train was carrying animals like exotic creatures from a traveling circus.
How many fucking circus trains capsized in like
I mean,
American history to make cryptids? Like, I feel like we hear it so many times.
Late 19th century, early 20th century, it was the prime piece of entertainment. People were fucking hawking their exotic animals constantly, and people were also putting little pebbles and shit on the railways of trains to knock them off.
Is that all it takes? Just a little pebble on the track?
Probably. Yeah, you get that thing off the little rail, and it's going to go flying. So supposedly this train crashed, and all the animals from the traveling circus ran into the swamps, and so most of these animals, being not native to the area, would just die because they're in a swamp, right?
Yeah, that's not a place that'll like. That's a bad. You could totally have like the plains of America, and like you're going through fucking the Dakotas, and the train goes off, and it's just in like a long flat fucking
yeah,
But a swamp is such a bad condition for most of the animals in a circus. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, inhospitable for things that are not adapted to living in a swamp, probably.
Yeah.
So these creatures run away, and the folklore claims that there may have been a troop of chimpanzees. So there was a troop of chimps. There's a troop of chimps that survived out there. And then, yeah, apparently they fucked alligators. There's nothing more elegant than that. It's just, yeah, they survived out there and they had sex with alligators, and that's how this creature came to be. This is, of course, not possible, right?
Yeah, I love... When did we figure out that animals can't just fuck each other and make, like, mutant spawn? Because I feel like that is a thing that you'll hear in like folklore around places.
I'm going to be I want to say this was a while ago, but if I read a report saying, hey, we did not confirm this till 2012, I'm going to freak out.
Yeah, maybe maybe for the sake of our sanity, that's a thing we shouldn't Google,
So the only other thing that I could find is there, and I don't know where this story comes from. I have to guess that it came from one of the books that retells the story of the honey swamp monster. Because it's such a short and basically inconsequential thing, but it has this mystery to it. I sort of assume I don't know whether this person was real or not, but apparently this person named Ted Williams. I don't even have a date. I'm realizing there's no date on this. But this guy Ted Williams claims that he has seen the creature on multiple occasions. And he personally believed that there were multiple swamp monsters of the same kind living in the area. And he said on one occasion, quote, "I could have killed them, but I didn't because they didn't seem to want to harm me." So I guess this Ted guy once took his boat out into the swamp, and he's setting up some trout lines. And then he disappears, never to be seen again.
Oh, shit. Okay.
I don't know people. So I guess this guy would talk about the swamp monster, then goes out in that area and disappears. So the insinuation, of course, is that the swamp monster got him, but he himself said he didn't think it was going to harm him. So
I mean,
what is the truth?
Sometimes people are wrong.
That's true. But sometimes, I would say most of the time. This is also my other favorite little thing. You know how a lot of cryptids will get discussions going and people start trying to be like amateur biologists about it?
Yeah.
One of my favorite things is that people will suggest that this is a Bigfoot style creature, but it has lived in the swamp for a really long time, and it has evolved to get webbed feet so that it can live in the swamp environment. And that's a great idea, I think.
Yeah.
So that is most of what I have on this particular swamp monster. I did find that it's popped up in a ton of other stuff. It's apparently very famous. So it's been in a lot of cryptid television shows like In Search of and Lost Tapes.
Fair.
But a couple of the ones that I thought were funny, Ian Colfer. You remember Ian Colfer?
The name rings a bell.
He wrote that kids series.
Oh,
about
yeah.
fairies.
Yeah, that's Artemis Fowl. Yeah.
Artemis Fowl, which for the life of me, I can't remember a single thing that happened in any of those books, but I definitely read a couple of them.
I remember the weird thing is the things that I do remember some of the plot of the first one. But the things that really stick with me is that the bodyguard drives a Peterbilt truck and has a Sig Sauer
Oh my
pistol.
God. I can't believe you
For some
remember that.
reason, those two details, like, I don't think I knew what a Peterbilt was when I first read that book. And so, like, it seemed like this really weird thing that they were talking. And Peterbilt is like a funny name for a thing. And Sig Sauer is also kind of a rolls off the tongue well.
Sure.
Yeah, anyway, I don't know why those things stuck in my brain for this
It's so
long.
funny the things that stick in your mind and the things that stuck in my mind are, between the two of us, we could have perfect recall of completely obscure nonsense. So, yeah, I guess Ian
Kenneth
Colfer
Branagh made a fucking movie of Artemis Fowl.
I know.
and
I didn't watch it.
Supposedly is awful.
Yeah, I didn't watch it. But I guess Ian Colfer has a book called High Fire, and there's a character in it named Vern who took inspiration from the Honey Island Swamp Monster specifically.
Huh.
You can also find the Honey Island Swamp Monster included in the TTRPG GURPS, which
What
I've
is
never
GURPS?
played. GURPS, it's a tabletop game. I've never
Okay.
played it. I think it's like a late 80s, early 90s joint. But
Okay.
I don't know much about GURPS, to be honest. And then yeah, there's a cartoon called The Secret Saturdays, where they have this creature, the Honey Island Swamp Monster, and they depict it as a Bigfoot with crab claws, which I thought was fun.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
that's their vision of what a Bigfoot from a swamp would look like, is a big crab. Anyways, that is the Honey Island Swamp Monster. That's just the first guy. I saved the juiciest stuff for the second half.
Hell yeah.
So now we have the story of a creature called the Vegetable Man.
I think I've scrolled past this on the Cryptid Wiki before.
This one's awesome. It's so, like I mentioned before, it is listed as a cryptid, but it has a lot of the qualities of cryptid and then some heavily implied extraterrestrial origins. You'll see what I mean. So the original story, as far as I can tell, comes from the infamous researcher of high strangeness, Gray Barker, who's come up on the show many times. I really want to do a Gray Barker episode. It's a bit harder to get your hands on his newsletter and some of his other published works than you might expect. But for some context, how should I say this? He was a West Virginia native. So this was a story in his area. He loves these weird stories. But what you'll find about him is that he is very, I think, most famous for first publishing and sort of being an origin point for the Men in Black.
Okay.
He first talked about it in one of his books. I think it's from the book They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. That would make a lot of sense if that's what, because I haven't actually read it, but I should. But what's interesting about this guy, so he also wrote Saucer Smear, which has come up, and these newsletters and things. He was heavily involved in the scene, but it's known that privately, between friends and family who knew him, he was sort of I don't know if cynical, I guess it is sort of cynical. He was a total skeptic behind the scenes and would tell people that he was really just writing about this stuff because it paid his bills, you know? He even this is also the guy who wrote a hoaxed a note thing to George Adamski. We could get into that some other time, but he kind of strung George Adamski along back in the day. Really interesting guy. We'll get into him again sometimes, but this is a creature that gets covered in one of his newsletters. Uh, so this is in the March 1976 newsletter that Barker published, and it has details of a harrowing account with a creature that would come to be known as Vegetable Man. I couldn't, like I said, couldn't get the Barker newsletter, but I do have another text on the account that seems to be just pulling from Barker's, that's also a big part of the UFO encrypted grift is just, you can just kind of rewrite other people's works. It's kind of what I do on this show too. You know, I rewrite what other people have said.
Yeah.
But this would be published 2 years after his newsletter. So in 1978, and this is the book Alien Meetings by Brad Steiger. I think I own a Steiger book, maybe. Anyway, here's the account, Niall.
Okay.
It was a beautiful summer day in July 1968. Jennings Frederick had been hunting woodchuck with a bow and arrow, but he had bagged nothing by sundown and headed for home. He was deep in thought when suddenly he heard what he described as, quote, a high-pitched jabbering, much like that of a recording running at exaggerated speed.
Okay, so we're getting some Alvin the Chipmunk action.
Yeah, some Alvin the Chipmunk type shit. According to writer Gray Barker, the voice seemed to be saying, "You need not fear me. I wish to communicate. I come as a friend. We know of you all. I come in peace. I wish medical assistance. I need your help." But who
needs medical assistance?
Medical assistance.
Do we have to do surgery on a grape here?
We're gonna do surgery on a piece of broccoli.
Okay.
Unless a grape is a vegetable, in which case, yes, we'll do it on a grape.
Yeah, fuck it.
But what was giving this message? And did Frederick hear it externally or pick it up through telepathy? Suddenly, there it was, a being with semi-human facial features, long ears, and yellow slanted eyes. Its arms were no bigger around than a quarter, and they terminated in hands that had 3 7-inch long fingers with needle-like tips and suction cups.
Okay.
Its body resembled the stalk of a plant in shape and color, for it was slender and green. At first, Jennings thought his hand had become entangled in a briar patch, but he soon realized that the humanoid had gripped his hand and was drawing blood from it. Suddenly, the creature's eyes turned from yellow to red and seemed to rotate as spinning orange circles. Jennings' pain immediately stopped as the hypnotic effect of the eyes caused him to freeze in his tracks. The requested medical assistance, in the form of a transfusion, seemed to last only about a minute, after which the creature released him and ran up a hill, covering more than 25 feet with each step.
Shit. This thing's got leaps.
This thing can fucking book it. The pain returned to Jennings' arm, and he headed for home. Shortly, he heard a humming sound that made him think that the Vegetable Man might be taking off in his flying saucer or whatever craft he had arrived in. Jennings returned home, but he decided that, rather than face ridicule, he would tell his family that he had been scratched by a briar. The story did not come out until he related it to his friend Barker some months later. So, this thing shows up, tells him a message of peace, and also requests medical assistance, and then just forcibly sucks his blood. What I like about this one is it just feels like an early science fiction movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it just feels like you can kind of picture a spindly creature that sucks your blood with its fingers from that era of films.
And the fingers are just like a little shaky and wobbly as they try to go to some I can see it.
Yeah, you can picture it. So he apparently relays this story to Barker. I find that interesting because the way this story plays out is you always get this guy Frederick's account of the creature. And then that story is always followed up with, by the way, Fredericks has been investigating UFOs for some time now. And apparently that UFOs and aliens have already come and visited his family.
Oh, of course.
So the account goes on to explain all of that. So here's what it says. UFOs were not strangers to Jennings Frederick and his family. His mother had had an experience when Jennings was still in school. After getting her husband off to work and the children ready for school, she washed the breakfast dishes. She glanced out the window and saw what she thought was a child playing in the field near a hillside. She was concerned that the youngster might touch the electrified cattle fence, and she decided to go to the porch to warn the youngster. When she got there, however, what she saw was not a child, but a small black or dark green creature. It was stuffing dirt and grass into a small bag it was carrying. Just beyond the creature was a saucer craft with an elevator extending to the ground. The small creature was attached to the craft by what appeared to be a cable of some type. The craft was about 10 feet in diameter and 5 feet high, cream and silver colored, with rows of windows under the dome. The machine seemed to rotate in a clockwise direction while emitting a humming sound. What I like about this description of the saucer and the thing is, like, I don't know if I've ever seen a story where the alien being has like an umbilical hookup to the craft.
It's got
like an
air
emergency.
hose.
Yeah, like you're,
Yeah.
from the abyss or whatever, you're like diving into the ocean or whatever. So it's kind of an interesting idea because, maybe our atmosphere would be the equivalent to an alien of diving into the ocean. It is how that is for us. But I also like to imagine that if the craft had took off without reeling him in, he'd hit a bunch of trees and shit on the way up and get yanked like a cartoon. That could be kind of fun too.
So how big is this thing?
It looks like the size of a child, apparently.
Okay. So it probably can fit in, because like the craft was only like 10 feet by 5
Not
feet.
very big, no.
And so I was like, this is a pretty small aircraft.
It's a very little green men on a scout ship vibe.
Yeah.
So it goes on to say this. The little humanoid appeared to be more animal than human. It was naked and had pointed ears and a tail, all of which gave it a satanic look. Little satanic shout out too. We got to have that in there. Got to throw it in the mix. She could detect no facial features. Mrs. Frederick ran into the house, jumped into bed, and covered her head with the blanket, hoping that whatever it was would disappear. A few minutes later, she looked out the window just in time to see the creature enter the craft and take off. The humming got louder as the craft rose in the air, as light as a feather. Mrs. Frederick told no one of the event until her son, Jennings, came home from school. A UFO buff, he knew what evidence to look for and immediately went to the area of the landing. He found a depression in the ground where the stem of the craft had rested, and from the description of the craft and the soil consistency, he estimated its weight at least a ton. He also found claw-like tracks from which he determined that the creature weighed about 45 pounds. Jennings sent hair specimens in the depressions together with plaster of Paris impressions of the tracks to the Air Force. Such evidence convinced Jennings that his mother had actually seen what she said she saw and that she had not been dreaming. According to Gray Barker, the Air Force offered, quote, an inane explanation, a weather balloon, and never returned the physical evidence. Jennings Frederick's encounters with UFOs and related subjects did not end with the vegetable man, although they did take a brief respite during his tenure in the Air Force. After his discharge, he was living with his parents once again, and one morning between 1 and 4 o'clock, he was awakened by a flash of red light. He instinctively drew his .38 service revolver from under his pillow and started to investigate. He thought at first the source might be the gas furnace, but he soon noticed a small canister about the size of an apple bouncing around the living room floor. Suddenly, a hand grabbed him, and he felt the prick of a needle in his left arm. He was confronted by 3 men dressed in black turtleneck sweaters and dark slacks, with ski masks on their face. One of them said, "The dogs have been darted and everybody gassed." "What about this one?" another one asked. "He's going out soon. He's half asleep," came the reply. "Don't worry about the needle. It will make his arm sore for a day or two. That's all." Just as the canister was about to reach Jennings, the men put on gas masks, and the last thing he remembered was seeing one of the men put the canister in his pocket. The men, according to Jennings, pulled something over his face and began asking him questions about UFOs and what he thought they actually were. They also asked what time it was and what he thought of the future. At that point, Jennings apparently passed out, for he remembers nothing more until the next morning, when no one else in the house reported anything strange from the previous night. He assumed that fumes from the canister had, quote, put them out. Gray Barker theorized about his interview with Jennings Frederick. Quote, maybe he was one of them. Maybe he had interviewed me instead of me interviewing him. He soon dismissed this idea, however, as he drove home through the rolling West Virginia countryside and settled for the idea that Jennings was a man possessed not by insanity, not by Christian devils, but by the UFO enigma. So a little extra tidbit in there from Gray Barker's account of him meeting the Men in Black. Gray Barker's,
Yeah.
seminal idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's
and these ones are in turtlenecks instead of suits and fucking.
Yes. So, God, I have learned so much about the Men in Black since we've talked about them on whatever episode we did them on years and years ago.
So
Genuinely,
long ago.
so much. I kind of want to revisit the topic sometime soon, but yeah. I mean,
we should.
I think that a Man in Black. Obviously, the sort of insinuation here is that these are government spooks of some kind, which can be a kind of Men in Black.
Yeah.
And then they are wearing all black. So I just think that the idea here is that this is sort of a Men in Black encounter. It's close enough to what you would think of as a men. Like, if it was just guys wearing masks and wearing all black and, like, drugging him, it could be whatever. But I think the fact that they're sitting him down and asking him what he thought of UFOs and what he thought of the future, that's a Men in Black experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. There's the extra tidbits there.
Yeah.
Now also, like, is this related? Like, the fact that in the encounter you talked about earlier, there was an arm pain thing, and then this guy has a shot that is arm pain. Do you think there's anything there?
It's a good question. I actually don't know the order of operations here. I think the idea is that story with the Men in Black comes after his experience with the vegetable man. So
yeah,
I think maybe that is what is implied by it. So apparently, whoever these people are, they want to know what he knows about the vegetable man. It's I don't know. I also love how they're just like, yeah, we've gassed the dogs, by the way, which we can wipe the sweat from our brows now because we narrowly avoided dog death. I think, unless there's details of the story I don't know.
They're only sleepy. Don't worry, guys. The dogs are just tired and they laid down for sleep, and they're not dying.
You sound like a parent consoling a child who's just seen their dog die.
I mean, I feel like sometimes that's what we have to do.
That's true.
We put people through the paces on this show.
That's very true. That's very true. So yeah, this whole thing, this was all, as I said, extracted from Barker's writing, but through this other writer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming it's pretty much the same story. I would love to actually read the newsletter. If anybody knows, the problem is when you look into Gray Barker's writings and the newsletters and stuff, it's lots of places selling them, and a lot of the specialty UFO and like Fortiana sites, it's in excess of $100 for a single newsletter. I think a lot of these are pretty rare. At least original prints are definitely rare. And I know there's an archive in like a West Virginia library somewhere, but I think you just would have to go there to look at it. So maybe that'll be a trip someday in my future, because I would really, really love to read some of that. Now, I did try to look around at the people in the story to see if I could find out if these were real people.
Okay.
I can tell you that Jennings Frederick and Jennings Frederick Jr. did in fact live in Fairmont, West Virginia around this time. And the obituary that I found from 2012, he died in his 60s. It mentions that he served in the U.S. Air Force during Vietnam. So that also tracks. But the other thing that I thought was great is it mentions that he was able to draw anything that he was looking at. He was a very talented artist.
Okay.
So, Jennings Frederick could just draw stuff just by appearance. And while I don't have Barker's actual newsletter, I found a couple articles showing illustrations and little snippets from the newsletter. And one of those snippets included an illustration that Frederick made of the vegetable man that is in Gray Barker's collection. Oh. And it is, I think, one of the most detailed and well-drawn illustrations made by an experiencer of high strangeness, at least in my...
Mm-hmm.
It's really good. The drawing is great. The vegetable man, from this drawing, he looks like he has a big, long asparagus body. He has carrot's top for hair. He's got big black eyes, pointed elven ears, big goddamn feet, and this big mouth that almost looks like it's contorted into a goofy smile.
Huh.
And Barker describes Frederick as an, quote, amateur rocket expert lately turned UFO investigator. So like I said, I think that when this story was brought to Barker, who apparently he was friends with, he was already deep into UFOs. And then, of course, his mother, whose name is Iva, by the way, she sees the diminutive alien scooping up dirt from the yard. So by the time the vegetable man came to visit, he had divulged that story. There was already a bunch of UFO stuff in his life. I don't want to speculate too much, but what it kind of reads like to me is Gray Barker was known to sometimes hoax stuff. And like I said, he liked to just write this stuff and make it sensational and fun to sell his books and things like that. I sort of wonder if this was like a little bit of a collaborative hoax, especially when you see the drawing of the creature, because it looks like a cartoon character.
Just the description of it sounds very exaggerated and it feels like someone messing around with thinking, oh, well, let's make a vegetable cryptid and then trying to like go from there.
Yeah, what can we get away with? How about a Veggie Tales creature from hell? Or outer space, I guess, is more like it. There was also one other little detail that I found that isn't in the Steiger coverage of the story, where Frederick describes the vegetable man's leaps as being like, quote, a modern spring-heeled jack.
Hell yeah.
So this was the spring-heeled jack cryptid made of vegetation. And it might have been an alien.
Yeah. All right. You got to keep that asparagus springy for that, I guess. You can't get that asparagus going all limp.
Do you think if you ate the vegetable man, your piss would reek for the next couple days?
I think like a month.
Yeah, bare minimum.
Yeah.
Probably tastes pretty good though in like garlic and butter.
But what doesn't,
That's true. Beyond this singular encounter, Niall, Vegetable Man lives on in the Cryptid Festival Veggie Man Day.
Hell yeah.
In Fairmont. And that is an event that just started last year.
Oh, so it's new.
It started up in 2024. They've got, shops selling Veggie Man merch, events, and all kinds of shit. Food, trucks, everything you could want at a cryptid festival.
People just walking around with like a big like asparagus stalk and wrapping and like wrapping to eat.
Yeah,
and there's people just selling asparagus.
Yeah, it's served in those like wrappings that you would get like toasted brown sugar almonds or whatever in.
Yeah,
but just giant stalks of asparagus. Yeah, I would love that, honestly. The other thing I found is that there's apparently a children's book written by Michael Strayer and illustrated by somebody called Ballyraven. And it's called Curious Creatures, The Vegetable Man. And it was published in 2022. So the Vegetable Man is making a comeback in these last couple of years.
Gaining in popularity.
I don't know what it is, but the Vegetable Man's making a fucking comeback. And here he is on our podcast. He won't go away now.
Now he's enshrined in the annals of history.
Yes, right in the annals. I would love to go check this festival out. I mean, I say that about every cryptid UFO thing, but I really would. I really would.
I would go to basically any cryptid festival. I think I've only been to Mothman Festival, and that was really fun. So I would go to another one.
And, if we were to go, I mean, West Virginia, I think we've talked about how West Virginia is an epicenter of cryptid and UFO weirdness.
Yeah.
I think you can at least in part thank Gray Barker for that, because he is one of the main guys at the forefront of all of that. And putting out a lot of weird stories from the area. And yeah, I mean, if we made a trip out there, it could be stop off at the library, check out the collection, gain tons of knowledge about Gray Barker's stuff, and then go pop off to the festival for a bundle of asparagus.
There you go.
Yeah. Sick. So Niall, that is the Honey Island Monster and the Vegetable Man.
Did you tell me what episode 49 was? What was the thing you had to go check?
I'm sorry. I didn't tell you this. So what it was is I found that certain places had different names for the Honey Island swamp monster, which I found interesting because what they say is it had different names depending on who, like what group you talk to. So there was the Native American name for it, which is Letiche, Letiche. And I can't believe, I think I accidentally skipped this because the supposed Native American legend surrounding this creature, whether or not it's actually the Honey Island swamp monster from the story that we discussed today, or whether this is just a separate legend that got incorporated into it, I don't know. But the internet claims that there was a child that was raised by alligators in the swamp, and that's how that thing came into being.
Gotcha.
But the reason I wanted to check is because episode 49 was about the Rougarou, which is the Cajun werewolf. And a couple of these sites just say, yeah, the Honey Island swamp monster, the Cajun people there just called it the Loup-garou. And I found that weird. The Loup-garou, which is a werewolf, basically. There's other things.
Yeah,
Go listen to the episode if you want to. It's, the audio is less good and we're much more foul and crass, but we cover it okay. The Loup-garou is like, yeah, it's a Cajun werewolf. So I found it sort of odd that it gets brought in as maybe another word for the Honey Island swamp monster, because I don't really see them as being particularly related. But then again, I thought there is the one that has like an almost canine reptilian sort of vibe to it. So I guess that sort of makes sense.
And
Loup-garous can be a bunch of different things, right?
I think they sometimes also smell like death and stuff. Like there's that kind of, vibe to them.
Yes. So yeah, that's actually why. So thank you for reminding me, because I would have totally forgotten to tell you that.
Yeah, I got to tie that button together.
Yeah. So yeah, those are our veggie cryptid creature things.
Okay.
Are you ready for a big question?
Oh, I'm always ready.
Niall, what vegetable do you think is due to be adapted as an alien and or cryptid, and why?
Interesting. Okay.
Now, I remember reading, I think it was a Goosebumps 2000 book when I was a kid that involved these giant broccoli monster aliens coming to take over the earth. And that's where my mind went. But I think we could maybe massage it, because asparagus broccoli's sort of like a type of asparagus if you think about it really hard, where it's like, what if we squashed down an asparagus and gave it a couple extra heads?
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
That's that's exactly
I don't know
how
if that's
I would
like
describe it.
Scientific, but that's how I envision it.
I don't think it is. My immediate thought is, when you get a stir fry,
Yeah.
and it has those little like baby corn in it that are like you eat the whole cob.
Yeah.
I the idea of a bunch of little small cryptids is appealing to me.
Sure.
So I think I want to make like a fucking like host of small baby corn cryptids.
Okay.
That can maybe live. I don't know where they would live. Where's I guess somewhere flat, maybe like Ohio,
Indiana, where the corn. capital.
Indiana. Isn't Iowa the corn capital?
I live here and I see corn everywhere I go, so I just have. But you might be right.
Regardless, it'll live. Look, they'll anywhere there's corn. These will be the true children of the corn. Fuck you, Stephen King, and all your bullshit.
Yeah,
These are the actual children of the corn. And they're these little tiny baby corns with like feet. And they basically look like when Fortnite makes like there's like the hot dog guy in Fortnite and stuff, where it's just like a hot dog and then wearing pants, and has like stick legs and arms. If you take away the pants, I'm talking about like a bunch of those little guys. So anytime if you're like walking through the corn, you're gonna all of a sudden you're gonna start getting swarmed at your ankles by all of these little like rabid fucking angry
little
violent pieces corn creatures that are just trying to take you down.
You're gonna just be chiseled away at like so many termites to a plank of wood, and you're just
It's a real Gulliver's Travels situation.
Did Gulliver did they eat Gulliver? Did they like strap him down and they're like, all right, dinner?
I don't know if they ate him. I know Jack Black got strapped down in that movie because that was part of the trailer. That's really all I know about Gulliver's Travels is the trailer for the Jack Black movie.
Sure, that makes sense. Do you think Jack Black being strapped down was a sexual awakening for some people out there?
So it's got to be for somebody.
I'm assuming. I have to assume.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to follow that up.
How many? That would be if Jules were here on this episode. I would ask her what Jack Black's sexual awakening was because I think she would have an opinion.
I'm gonna guess,
but
Mars
Gulliver's Travels
Attacks.
feels a little late.
Yeah,
I was gonna say it feels like it has to be earlier. Like Mars Attacks would make
Mars
sense, where he has a
Attacks.
very small part.
I mean, alternatively, we could just
but high
ask
fidelity.
her. Oh, true.
Yeah.
We could just ask her how she felt about Jack Black being tied up and he can't run anywhere and he's just there all vulnerable, and if that does anything for her.
Yeah, that's fair. We'll table that for the next time Jules is on the show. We'll talk to her about Gulliver's
I feel
Travels.
bad doing that with her not here. I want to see. I was really torn. I was torn between radishes and carrots.
Okay.
And I think I want to settle on carrots because I think it's time for carrots to get revenge on rabbits.
Kind of an ant. Like, now, did you read the Bunnicula books as a kid?
I did not. I know what you're talking about, but I did not read those.
This vampire rabbit would suck carrots dry.
Yeah, I think it's time.
So really, this is kind of a turnabout.
Yeah, I think it's time for the carrots to grow arms and legs, and pop out of the ground and be really big, and maybe they pick up a rabbit and they kind of crush it like a Capri Sun pouch directly into their mouths. With all the rabbit juices, they just suck it straight out. So Bunnicula, you had your time in the sun. Well, probably not the sun because he's a Dracula. But
yeah,
these are
a lot
going
of
to be
nighttime stuff.
Vampiric carrot men that just suck rabbits dry.
That's the idea of a big carrot grabbing a rabbit and like biting into it like a Capri Sun and squish. It's very visceral.
Yeah, it is.
And okay, did we just like accidentally did we just Jeff Johns Attack the Killer Tomatoes? And by that I mean like Jeff Johns is responsible for the various other colors of lanterns. This is a shorthand I use for like lazy comic ideas. Is Jeff Johnsing it?
Wow.
Because I don't like him.
Okay.
But like where you're just like going away from the original concept and expanding it into this like multifaceted mythos. So we got Attack the Killer Tomatoes. They're big. They're aliens. They come down and they squish George Clooney and shit. But then you've got your big carrot men that are going around just like palming rabbits and crushing them. And then we've got armies of little baby corns.
Yeah.
And eventually we'll have to like have a fucking like stir fry or fruit or like a vegetable kind of medley.
They're going to have to make a stir fry out of these guys.
Yeah, that's how you're going to fix it.
I think though that like maybe the carrots could be the like maybe they're like, oh fuck, we gotta kill these carrot men. They're killing all our rabbits, which we need. And they're like, the carrots would like take damage or whatever. Like they're taking like they're getting like taking shelling from like tanks and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then but then they watch as a heavily damaged carrot squats its tip back into the earth and just regenerates.
Yeah.
And so they gotta like come up with a way to dice that carrot in one fell swoop in an instant so they can stir fry it immediately before it's able to squat that tip.
And honestly, they also the biggest thing is you have to deal with the leader.
Yeah.
AKA the king of carrot flowers.
Oh, boy.
you have to go take out the king.
Have we ever,
you know?
Okay. I want to finish with a little story that you'll remember this. We had Niall and I were in a dorm together back in the day.
True.
And there was this guy who we didn't like who he ruined Neutral Milk Hotel for years. Genuinely, I couldn't listen to that band for years because this motherfucker, we had shared bathrooms with other people on the same floor.
Yeah, you shared it with between two bedrooms.
Yeah.
You shared a bathroom.
And this motherfucker, this absolute pig of a human,
Yep.
would go into the shower, turn on Neutral Milk Hotel, the communal shower, and fuck his girlfriend listening to Neutral Milk Hotel. I mean,
Loudly.
like, loudly, and like just the native bad vibes on having sex to Neutral Milk Hotel. Like, that's already bad. But you're a 20-year-old doing this in a communal shower. I mean, fuck you.
I also one time had to run sound for this guy at like a battle of the bands type thing where I was at a local venue I was running sound at. And he did like a Neutral Milk Hotel cover and like I think maybe then it wasn't, it might have been like Tom Petty or something. Like it was obviously like this is the thing he really liked, and then he was trying to like
do it in the
get
style
cred
of,
by doing an older by like doing like a more a bigger name musician or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
And he had like various band kids from the band backing him up, and I did not put my best efforts into
That's
making sure he sounded good because this guy sucked.
I think the big takeaway from this episode is don't go to college.
Yeah, that's the big
if
one.
we can leave you with one message today, that's going to be it. So, all that being said, Niall, would you like to move on to some business?
Yeah. So if you want to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird, and we're almost certainly there.
You can also follow us on Blue Sky at It Gets Weird. We're still on Twitter, like we said, but
don't really use
it much because it just continues to get worse and worse day by day. We can't even communicate to the point where Niall can't send me the method that we use to send Zoom links back and
that
forth.
May be more my computer than anything else because computer's
enough.
old.
So yeah, check us out on Blue Sky. Twitch.tv/itgetsweird. It's been a busy couple weeks. First I was busy, then Colin was busy. We're going to get back to our Pokemon Nuzlocke real soon. I did stream this last weekend, so you know, be on the lookout for us popping up and streaming. Niall played Fortnite with me over the weekend, and it was great.
Yeah, we might do that again soon.
So please come follow us there. Email us, itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. Like Mars, you can get your email read on the show if you have something cool to tell us about, or something interesting, or something. I appreciate a heartfelt email, and Mars's email read is heartfelt to me. So
yeah, I really like that. Thank you.
I appreciate hearing from the people out there. We both do. Just let us know how we should address you, and we may read it out if it's a good email. Most importantly, patreon.com/itgetsweird. That's where you're going to find all the bonus content. There is a $1 tier. That is the tip tier. You're just giving us a buck and saying, hey, thanks for doing what you do. Here's $1 a month. Do with it what you will. But we do have a $2 tier and a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, you get It Gets Weird TV, where right now, Niall and I are about to finish up. We are on the tail end of Neon Genesis Evangelion, my favorite anime, and soon to be Niall's. And you get to vote on what weird shows we watch. We've watched a bunch of different other shows. We watched Supernatural. We watched The X-Files for a couple seasons. We watched Demi Lovato's show on whatever that was. So yeah. So that's the $2 tier. At the $5 tier, you get an extra bonus show in the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV called World of Weird, where Niall and I talk about whatever the fuck we want to talk about. We just get to riff for an hour plus. It's a great time. We're having a lot of fun having those discussions. It's sort of in its infancy, so you're here to get on the ground floor if you sign up for the $5 tier, and you can catch up pretty quick. I think we're 14 episodes in.
I'm chronicling my year-long quest to watch every Godzilla movie.
Yeah, and I'm saying all kinds of shit you would not believe, and it's
all
true.
Kyle has a tendency to, we're on the Patreon, let's get the hot takes out. So
that is true. So yeah, that's at the $5 tier. But whether you don't, and of course at the $5 tier you get It Gets Weird TV in addition to World of Weird. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to the main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday, And you get access to the Discord where we're hanging out, chatting with listeners like you. You can talk to us directly there. It's a lot of fun. We have a lot of great people in the community constantly telling us about interesting or funny stuff going on in the world of weird. So please join today. It's a crazy good value. We have a huge back catalog of episodes, and we really appreciate and can use your support. I mean, they brought it up at the start of the episode that we don't put advertisements in this. We put our foot down on that at the start of this show. We never have, never will. It is all based on your help. And if you can't give us money, the next best thing you could do is tell some friends about us. Tell some friends. Tell people about It Gets Weird. Let them know, hey, this is the best conspiracy, UFO, cryptid, ghost podcast out there. So please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird podcast.
All right. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for continuing to support the show. This has been It Gets Weird, and I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle signing out.